I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Ballara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you. Hi everyone, I'm Jason Ballara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Blake Anthony Carter. Blake is a passionate and genuine human being, but also a real estate professional. He's the co-founder of Cribs, a full-service turnkey company for short-term rental and co-living investors. Cribs helps the clients find, purchase, and renovate, design, manage properties all in-house. So I'm gonna stop there, Blake, because I think there's a whole lot of actually really cool stuff in your bio that I'm hoping we'll get to talk about in detail. But first, before we get started, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for taking out the time. I know it's early for both of us today, but good time to have good conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Why don't we start with just having you tell us your background, give us your story, and then we'll from there we'll get into what you're doing with Cribs and everything.
Yeah, my story, man. Essentially, I've been in real estate for my entire life. Actually, my mom was a partner in a successful mobile home retail and flipping business, and this was pre 2008, and did that for several years. And as a kid, I grew up around that and learned the ins and the outs of lending and how to rehab property and how to sell things to people and how to communicate to people. And it was a huge learning lesson to be around that as a child because they would literally just have me in the office and I would be doing like schoolwork or whatever, right? And that was a huge, huge learning experience for me. And after 2008, from a series of unfortunate events, they essentially lost the business and our life was flipped upside down. We all of a sudden were having to couch surf and find housing where we could. Uh, we had a great place that we were living, and that was just not within the means anymore. And so, for a period of about 2 years, there was some real pain in our lives, trying to make it, I suppose, make it out of the recession. And that was really cool to experience as a kid, getting to see my mom go from hero to zero and then build her way back up now to hero where she is now. um, that was a huge learning experience, and that also made me really scared of real estate, having gone through that as a kid, having seen my mom go through that. And so for many years I was very I don't know how I'd word it, but I was not interested in getting into real estate, even though I knew so much about it and I was naturally interested in it. But I didn't want to, or I suppose I had a bad taste in my mouth from that. Um, but I was always drawn by it, and eventually, after working in property management for some time, I decided to just go all in on real estate. Decided to own that passion that I had inside of me for real estate. And I have worked in several different areas of the industry. Like I said, I started out in property management, just working as like a leasing agent, and that was a huge learning lesson for me as well. And I moved my way up in that world really as much as you can. My last position held, I was the national leasing director for CWS Apartment Homes, which is like one of the largest syndicators in the country. And they would just send me to properties to like fix problems, basically. Just use my experience if they were having issues with occupancy or renewal rates or really whatever. Because I had that experience, I was able to go and figure those things out. That was a huge learning lesson. And eventually got my real estate license and decided to just go all in on working for myself. We started our company Cribs. It stands for Creative Real Estate Investment Business Solutions. And we started that out of the the struggle that I saw people having with wanting to invest in the area that I'm in Austin, Texas, but not being able to cash flow. And so the only kind of people that were really investing in Austin, and I'm sure it's similar to like LA, are people that are buying these properties and are willing to just sit on negative cash flow so they can
Sure.
hope that they can bank in on the equity. But that wasn't the solution for most people. And so um, it started off working in what we call co-living, which is basically where you rent out a house by the room. I'm sure you see that in LA as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then we got into short-term rentals as well, just through working with clients and seeing that there was a need. It started off, I was just helping them find the properties as their real estate agent, and then we were helping them manage them because we were the only people that were doing anything like that at the time. Um, and then after that, uh, my partner Jeremy, who's the co-owner of the company, he's extremely skilled in design and really management. He was a property manager at a pretty high level, for a bunch of properties downtown, and that's what he was doing at the time. And we decided to go all, or we decided to go together in this, and we realized that we have what it takes to kind of make the company turnkey for our investors. So people are able to come to us. We can help them find the properties, purchase them, do all the rehab and renovation. We have several construction crews that we work with. And then even more than that, we help them design and furnish the property and then manage it on the back end as well.
I mean, it sounds like a great and realistically needed business model there. As you mentioned, some of these, I guess Austin's not quite as big as LA, but Austin has been so hot now for a number of years, and really experiencing a tremendous amount of growth. So what used to be a place where people went for affordability, it's not really,
Yeah, it's
it's
true.
not really there anymore. Um, well, I mean, really interesting story in that, you say you've been in real estate your whole life, and like quite literally seems you've been in real estate your whole life. And
Yeah.
most, that's not true for most of the guests that I have on the show. Most of us come, you know, by way of some other path, and maybe have something in your background that sort of at least planted the seed. But it sounds like, your mom was a big inspiration for all of it, and
Mhm.
interesting to kind of live through that 2008 financial crisis as a kid,
Mhm.
impacted by, you know your parent being in that, real estate space. So
Yeah.
it's a pretty unique perspective, in having been through that. And I suspect that also maybe as a kid, couch surfing and things like that might have in a way been fun for you, while it may have been a struggle at times. But if like staying with friends and things like that, I think sometimes when you're young you think
Yeah.
that's cool, but also obviously had an impact on your decisions going forward, and probably always will. The You said you said that you sort of shied away, had a bad taste in your mouth about real estate, but though you went and worked as a property manager, so it was kind of like so much what that you found the avenue in it that felt safer maybe. um
Well, it's also like who who we knew, right? Like at the time when I initially got into property management, which by the way, if anyone's listening to this and is interested in getting started in real estate, I think property management is a phenomenal like entry into the industry. You can learn so much about real estate through that avenue. But regardless, uh, we had so many connections in real estate because that's the industry that my mom was in for so long. And when I left high school, I was my first job ever was water and fire damage restoration. So houses would like flood or catch on fire, and I was like the labor that would go and like demo the house and carry all the crap. It was actually
Put on a
terrible.
hazmat suit,
Um,
yes. Sounds
yeah, it
like
was
a
horrid.
terrible job.
Yeah, it was horrid. And so I was like, yeah, this is not what I want to be doing. I wanted to get into some kind of sales role. It's like really what I thought I wanted to do. And then um, we knew people like in the property management industry. And so I was able to make that connection. That's just how I got started. And as I went down that rabbit hole, I was like, man, like I'm good at this real estate thing. I understand how to talk to people, and just kind of grew from there.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes sense. It's what you saw, kind of growing up. You have good examples of success in that area. Got hit by a hard time in the market, but regardless, the techniques and methodology isn't different when the
Yeah.
market's different. It's just, you just got to be maybe a little more careful, I guess. But um, so tell us a little bit about, kind of the process with cribs. Like if I'm an investor, I want to come to you and
Mhm.
um, set something up. What would that look like for me? What would you, kind of be coaching me on?
So uh, we have calls every week with people that come to us and have money that they want to invest, specifically in the Austin or surrounding areas in Texas. So with us, it's like I said, we take you through every step of the way. So people come to us, they are interested in having real estate in this area because they know it's a high growth market. And based on their situation, based on like their cash position, their risk aversion, a bunch of different factors, just like after learning their story, we can kind of figure out what the best avenue is and what what their buy box looks like if they don't already have one. So it's figuring out that, and then really like we have a ton of connections with um, off market properties, wholesalers, and so we do a lot of deals that way. We do a lot of stuff on market, especially now where we're getting a ton of really good deals on market right now. But after we find the property, we we basically start getting. Um, I'm sure you've had this experience in what you do, but we start getting bids for renovations as soon as we're under contract, right? So we'll
Mhm.
get 3 to 5 bids typically for whatever rehab and renovation is needed. After that bidding process is done and we close on the property,
Excuse me.
bless you, we try to
Thank you.
have the renovation started within a week of closing on the property. And those renovations, like we have different levels of what that looks like, right? So it could be anywhere from just getting it cleaned up, um, fixing a couple doorknobs, like a small make ready, all the way
Right.
to we've done 150,000, $200,000 renovations on just a single family home. And so we do all levels. We have people for all different things. Once it's after that, or once we're finishing up that rehab process, we start the furniture process. We start ordering. We start putting together like their design package. Um, once all that is approved, we start ordering furniture, we start designing it. That process usually takes about 3 weeks or so. Once it's furnished, we go live. We have a whole slew of checklists that we work with, um, just through learning the best process of how to make this thing happen. And so, um, like our average time from close to going live for our short-term rentals is about 75 days. And that's only because typically we're putting a higher level of renovation into those properties, especially if we want to make them more profitable. For our co-living rent by room type properties, our average time frame is about 30 to 45 days, depending on the level of rehab that is needed. Just because with those properties, they don't have to be as nearly as nice. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, like I said, it's literally we hold their hand every single step of the way that they come to me. I have conversations with people. Hey, I have 100K that I want to invest in real estate. What's the best way to allocate this? And we're able to help them through that process.
Can you just for listeners, can you define co-living? Kind of what that looks like so
Yeah,
people, I think maybe mostly obvious, but I just want to make sure people understand what we're talking about.
yeah, it's literally renting a house out by the room. People do it in different ways. There's a lot of people that will do like high-end co-living, or they'll specialize in working with travel nursing, or they'll specialize in working with like digital nomads, things of that nature. But specifically, we do about 90% of our properties are like a standard house that is rented out by the room. We furnish the common areas. We don't furnish the bedrooms. We provide Wi-Fi, all the utilities. We clean the house twice a month, and we take care of the lawn. So they literally pay the same amount every single month, and they don't really have to worry about much other than just taking care of their life, right? So it's a really cool deal. One, because we can offer this awesome affordable housing opportunity to people, which is really needed in Austin. I mean, rent growth has been like 20-30% year over year in Austin the past couple 2-3 years. And so it's not affordable for people now to just get like a studio or a one bedroom apartment, especially if their work is downtown somewhere, or in the city where they can't afford to live. And so we have rooms, or we have these houses with rooms all over the city, and we can offer this really awesome affordable housing opportunity. It's professionally managed, it's cleaned twice a month, it's well taken care of, and people love it. um, on the flip side of that, it serves our investors really well because they're able to cash flow, right? Yeah, and it has kind of the similar economy of scale as multifamily. Um, Not quite the same way, but right, I might have a house that is 5 or 6 bedrooms, and just because one person moves out, we're not at zero. Versus if you're doing a standard long-term rental, you have one house, someone moves out, you're literally at zero income. With rent
Sure.
by room, you have a lot of that scale that kind of capture as you have vacancy.
Yeah, sure. No, that makes sense. So are you said you're furnishing the common areas, not the bedrooms. Are these, you mentioned kind of the nurse thing. Are you trying to, I mean, I guess you can get really creative with it because
Mhm.
you can have different rooms be different. If someone wants to stay for, they want a year-long lease, they can have a
Yep.
room for a year-long lease, or they can, if it's one of these traveling nurses and they're there for 3 months, they can be 3 months. I guess you don't even have to kind of keep it all the same, right?
Mhm.
Is that, or do you try to keep it the same within a single household?
Yeah, so different people run their properties differently. The type of rentals that we're doing are advertised mainly to young professionals, people that are in town for like contract work. We do get some travel nurses, but for the most part, for travel nurses, you need to be within really close proximity to a hospital.
Yeah,
And so we only have a couple properties that are like that. For the most part, we're signing 6 month plus leases, and then we actually allow them to go month to month, because a lot of the benefit of the co-living type model is the flexibility of it. And so we do the initial 6 month lease. We started when we first started, we did 3 month leases, and then we were like, man, we're having to turn these like we're having to turn these rooms over like a ton,
right.
and so that just wasn't efficient. And what we've also found with 6 month leases is if we can find someone that's there for 6 months and they're willing to be there for 6 months and they like the property, they're probably going to stay longer. Versus someone who's there for
Sure.
3 months, you're going to have to turn that over and over. We have done some rooms that will furnish and just advertise to like travel nurses or traveling professionals that are just there for a month to 3 months. And you can get higher rates on those for sure, but your turnover and vacancy might be higher as well. And so we look for, most of our rooms are like just standard rentals. We have the same type of uh, requirements as you would for like a regular rental. We have a minimum credit score. You have to make a certain amount of income, et cetera, et cetera. And so we have well qualified people in these houses. They they take care of the house. We take care of the house, and they're paying pretty good rates for these rooms, where like I have investors that are cash flowing $500 to $1,000 a month on these rent by room houses, and that's in Austin, Texas, which is really really difficult to do. And
Yeah,
that's from the beginning. That's not assuming rent growth over the next few years.
right, right. No, I mean, it sounds like a great, it's not, I've heard about people doing it in these bigger cities that are just, the costs are too high to really cash flow effectively,
Yep.
in a long-term type rental. Um, what are the rental regulations around Austin? Maybe it's different in, by neighborhood. I know some cities, even it varies by neighborhood, but typically those midterm rentals, they don't put a lot of regulation on. But when you start to talk about doing short-term rentals, what are those? And obviously these can change, but what are you
Yeah.
seeing in Austin currently as far as regulations for your short-term rentals?
So short-term rentals, obviously regulations in that industry, in that world, are a very hot topic. In Austin specifically, it's essentially outlawed to be investor owner of a short-term rental in like the city limits of Austin.
Mhm.
People still do it unpermitted. It's just very risky.
Yeah.
Not something I recommend that my investors do, but basically in the city limits of Austin, it's essentially completely restricted. They do have what's called a Type 2 permit, which is where you can, if it's your primary residence and you want to make that a short-term rental, you can get the permit to do that. There's a lot of people that will come and they might live in LA, but they'll make their primary residence in Austin just to have a short-term rental in Austin. I have
Okay.
a few investors that have done that. But a lot of our investors are having a lot of success in like the suburbs outside of Austin. We do a lot of work in the ETJ of Austin, which is like basically outside the city limits. So
Yeah.
you're technically in Austin, but you don't have the same restrictions. So we look for properties in that area. But we're also looking for like emerging markets around our area. So we have a lot of like lake and river areas that do really, really well for short-term rentals.
Hmm.
And the market may not be as saturated in those areas. And so we're starting to look for deals out there. And for us, it's always constantly chasing like where the next boom is going to be. And so we have a few tools that we work with to try to find that. But right now we're finding our best success both in the realm of avoiding restrictions, but also really good cash flow or a good cash on cash in the suburbs and the ETJ of Austin.
Yeah, a lot of cities have gone to that, kind of it has to be your residence to have. I know Atlanta just enacted that as well. You've some,
Hmm.
it's like you can have two short-term rentals. One of them has to be your primary residence, and they all have to be permitted, and obviously
Yeah.
people do it anyway. But yeah, you're taking a risk. A risk of I don't know what. I don't know. I haven't actually heard of what happens if you get caught with a short-term rental, other than they might make you stop doing it. But yeah, I don't
Yeah, and
know
it's
if
like
it's
what
fines or.
yeah, that's the thing, right? Like there's not at least in Austin, they really try to crack down on it, but I think there's something like 2,400 permitted short-term rentals in the city limits of Austin, and there's something like 12,000 listings active right now in the city of Austin. So
Yeah,
a lot of people are doing it without permission, and the city doesn't really have an effective way of shutting that down. Whether that's good or bad is not for me to decide, but it's definitely interesting.
yeah. I mean, they would ultimately they'd have to create some sort of policing arm for short-term rent.
Yeah.
It's probably just not worth the expense of doing
Yeah,
that.
literally, you have to make
It's
a
like,
whole
yeah,
section for it.
I think they create those regulations probably to make whoever doesn't want short-term rentals around happy, make it look like they're doing something. And if they catch someone obvious, they find them. But like realistically, it would be a hard thing, I think, to really, I don't know, control.
Yeah.
Um, Really cool. Well, let's switch gears, Blake. I want to get the chance to ask you the questions that I ask every guest. First one being based on the name of the show, that is Know Your Why. And so my question for you is what is your why? What drives you forward towards bigger and bigger success?
Um, so I would say my why really comes from a want and a need for freedom. Um, that I think we spent some time growing up as a child, where we were completely uh s- like we were completely restrained by the restrictions that other people had on us, whether it was because of income or location or just circumstance. And that really made me desire to have my own personal freedom in my life to be able to decide when, where, how, and who. And I talk about that a lot in my life. Um, but really, what drives me, and I wrote about this, is like this crazy, insatiable, um, what is the word? Competitiveness. Competitiveness. I have my dad was a football coach growing up. Like he's a high school football coach, and he really instilled in us this like really heavy level of competitiveness. We were three brothers. I was the youngest, and it was always a race, or who can lift the most, or who can carry the most groceries inside. And we played a ton of sports, obviously. And that competitiveness of any situation I find myself, I want to win. Like it's actually probably unhealthy, right? Like I'm at the grocery store and I'm like trying to beat this old lady to get to this block of cheese or something. But from a business standpoint, it's actually helped me a ton. Uh, because in the like best, nicest way possible, like I want to beat everyone else at the same thing, right? Like I don't necessarily wish them ill, but I want to be better than them. And so that's really helped me a ton. That's like my main drive, I would say.
Very cool. Yeah, I think con- uh, productive competitiveness is a very, very effective tool,
Yeah.
in anything, sports, life, business, whatever it is. I think it can be really very beneficial. Um, Typically, my next question is, tell me something about yourself that people don't know, but I want to have the opportunity to have you tell us a little bit about ServeInspire, because I think that's
Yeah.
an important thing. I assume to you, but I think it seems like a very important thing. So I want to just ask you to talk about that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. So when we went through what we went through, spending those 2 years, um, we were deemed homeless by the city of Austin due to having unstable housing and unstable income for those 2 years. Um, and you can't help but have a ton of empathy for people when you go through something like that as a kid. Um, and you can see it on both sides, right? Like we were doing very well, and then we were like literally doing we were literally deemed homeless, right? And so having seen both sides, you can't help but have a ton of empathy for other people. And I developed a real passion for the homeless. I always really cared. I always had this thing in my head, I didn't really care if they were grateful or not. I just wanted to help people. And um, it all, like the backstory for ServeInspire, which to add context, is a nonprofit that my mom and I started. The backstory really starts whenever whenever we were just coming out of that bad time, I guess you could say. It was my mom and I spending Thanksgiving together. My brother was there, but a lot of times it would just be us two, or us three, and we would make this full Thanksgiving meal. And because I don't actually like Thanksgiving food, I wouldn't eat it, and so we would just go give it away to the homeless, like a lot of people do on Thanksgiving. And that started like a little tradition where friends and family would join us. They would bring food to give out, and they would start bringing supplies and clothes. Like year over year, more people showed up. They would bring more things, and after several years of doing that, my mom and I decided that, hey, we should make this a real thing. And so we started to host multiple events a year where we were giving away not just food, but really like a lot of supplies and necessities, clothing, deodorant and soap, and backpacks and sunscreen, just like a lot of like really important necessities to help these people survive. um, we officially formed our real 501(c)(3) a few years ago, after having done it for several years before that, just like, as a volunteer organization. um, and we started a board, and now we're working towards being able to offer free mental health care to people that are in those circumstances, to help them really get out of it, because we don't want to just enable them to be in those circumstances. We want to actually help them improve and get out of those circumstances for people who want it. And so that's one thing that we've been really working through. We've had a slow year this year because Cribs has taken off, but over the past 6 years, we've grown a ton. And it's something that's like super special to me, and important to my mom as well.
Very cool. Very cool. Um, I'm in LA, and I know Austin has a similar narrative, and that there's, this huge homeless problem, the homeless crisis. It's, with the
Yeah.
elections, it was like everywhere. I get really frustrated with hearing that, because what I think most people think is the homeless crisis is that you can see them,
Yeah.
and
That's a really good point.
that the homeless crisis is not that they actually care about the homeless people. It's that they don't want to see them out on the streets near them and
Yeah.
stuff. And I often make the point, like, I'm originally from Boston. We had homeless
Mm.
people there too. But if I was going to be homeless, I would live in Southern California or Austin or someplace where it's nice to be outside, right? So
Yeah, no kidding.
it's not like it's a problem, but I think the focus is on the wrong part of the problem, but not for what you're doing. So I think that's really special and important. So yeah, thank you for doing that. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a great cause, and I it's nice to hear that when I do often get frustrated hearing about this homeless crisis that people want fixed but don't actually want to do something about it, and they just don't want to see it. I think it's really the main problem.
That's a very good way to say that.
um so again, thank you for what you're doing with that. I think it's very important work. When people hear this and they are want to reach out to you, what's the best way? What's the best way to get in hold of you? What's the best way if they want to get involved with cribs and getting themselves a income property?
Yeah, I mean, cribs. The best way to reach out to us is you can contact us via our website. It's cribsconsulting.com, and then we also are on Instagram at Cribs Consulting. And then my Instagram is blake.anthony.carter. It's my full name. Um, those are really the best ways to get a hold of me. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, all the things, um, social media, and yeah. If people want to get started with cribs, we have a contact form on our website that people just submit their information. We usually call them within the next day, and we can get the process started.
Awesome. Awesome. Very cool. Final question for you. What is a piece of advice that you would give someone getting started in real estate? What would you tell them to kind of help them get going and find success like you have?
Pick one route and just stick with it. I think a lot of people tend to have, um, I don't know what I'm
Like
struggling to
shiny
find a word
object
this morning,
syndrome?
but shiny object. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people have shiny object syndrome, and the best thing you can do is just pick one avenue and go forward with it. It may not even work out as the right one that you want to move forward with. I mean, I explored several different avenues of getting into this real estate thing when I first started, and I didn't really blow up in the business until I was like, okay, this is all we are going to do.
Mhm.
And now that we've done that, now that we've focused on one thing, we've been able to expand, right? Like we started with just doing sales and property management. We grew into other avenues. We started doing our own investing, flipping houses, and now we just did our first multifamily syndication. We did 14 units in Canyon Lake that were turning into short-term rentals. But that was not my focus when I first started. Our focus when we first started was doing what we're doing and just making that the main thing.
Yeah. I think it's a really great point. I think it's very easy to get caught up in shiny object syndrome. I think, it's, and I think the reason is because, especially in real estate, like, there's a lot of really cool things you can do and a lot of really good ways to make money. And so it's, easy to jump around. However, none of them are going to be successful overnight. So your point
Yeah.
about, sort of picking one and sticking with it and then expanding from there is a great one, because I think it's just, you got to give it time to actually see that it works, see how you feel about it, and then if you want to make a change, fine, but give it the chance to be successful and be what you thought it might be in one particular niche.
Yeah, I think patience is important, and that's something that a lot of people struggle with in our day and age of instant gratification. It's something
Mhm.
that people talk about often, but like multifamily syndication, for example, like what you guys do. I know a lot of people that got started in that world and didn't do their first deal for over a year, maybe 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And it's just constantly making offers, talking to people that you can partner with, and doing all these things, having that vision. But if you would have stopped doing multifamily 6 months in and was like, I'm gonna be a wholesaler now, you would have never gotten where you're at.
Right. Right. No, it's totally true. And yes, it takes takes a while, takes a year, and sometimes it's going to take you might do a couple together and it might take another 9 months or something. I mean, it's
Or,
just
another good piece of advice I would say that really worked for us was work for free or work for cheap. Like if you
yeah,
want to learn, um, our very first ever like management client, we did like probably 70% less expensive than we are now, like on our fee. And that's just because I wanted him to say yes. I
right,
wanted him to want to work with us. And that was our only value proposition at the time.
right,
Now
right,
we actually know what we're doing, right? But a lot of people want to make money now, or they hear people talk about how much money you can make doing this. And I agree, and there's a lot of ways to make really good money in real estate, but you're never going to learn if you can't actually get the business, and no one's going
right.
to pay full price for someone that doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, there's a lot of ways to get going. There's a lot of ways to
Yeah.
break into the business, different avenues, and also, like you said, you can work for free or work for cheap. Go the apprentice route, whatever you need to
Yes.
do to get
Yep.
yourself in there and get the education, and then having the patience and the kind of persistence to stick with something and go after it, kind of full bore. So yeah, all of that I think is phenomenal advice. Well, listen, it's been great. It's been an awesome conversation. I do very much appreciate your time. Appreciate you having you on the show, and all that you shared. And so thank you for being on.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, man.
Absolutely. Everyone listening, when you hear this episode, I'm sure you're going to love it. Check out cribsconsulting.com, and if you would, please like, rate, and review the show.
I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Ballara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you.